Hello, and welcome to Arts and Entertainment.
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Welcome to the show. This is the second part of our little mini two-parter where we talk about our cultural obsessions inside the world of arts and entertainment. Today, it's my turn. Randall, do you know what my little obsession is?
Yes, I do. Do you want to introduce it, Chris? Or
I do want to introduce it. I was hoping you were going to say no, I don't, but how... well, look,
I'm sorry. Well, we already talked about it before the show, Chris.
That's very true. So, hey, audience, before we even get into this, as always, if this is your first time and you want to hear more of this show that you've never heard before, or you've been listening to the show in a while and you know we're pretty groovy, please like and subscribe, share, and comment. Tell us what an amazing job we are doing or what a terrible job we are doing. And if you want, we'll even do a whole show dedicated to why you think we're terrible or wonderful or some future subject that you are interested in us discussing. We're all about our listeners, for better or for worse. And Randall, if people do want to comment, where are some places they can comment?
Well, our Facebook page is good. There's lively discussion on there sometimes. And check out our website, chrisandrandall.com. You can send us an email. We're on YouTube. Lots of places.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say, especially because I wonder, I think, Randall, the thing that I'm about to share with everybody here, I don't think I am unique. I know I'm not unique, but at the same time, I rarely ever run into anyone else who does this. So I guess maybe I am. I grew up in New York City, as I keep on oversaying to every listener, and I've always loved theater. And ever since I was a kid, we would go to see Broadway plays, both stage plays that are what we call straight plays, musicals, one-man, one-woman shows, anything on a Broadway stage. I have just been a really big fan. And you, when you were in New York, did you ever see any Broadway plays?
I don't think I have.
Okay, well, not a problem. When you go to any show on a Broadway stage, they give you a playbill. And I have one right here. For those of you who are watching, here is a playbill. And for those of you who are listening, how would you say, what are the dimensions of this pamphlet?
It's like a half a sheet of paper or so. Yeah.
Right, and it's got the, what they would call the poster in the style of the play. Something just dropped out. That's why I'm laughing. And I'll get to it in a moment. And inside are things that your usher will hand you before the play. And it's kind of like a magazine in that it has a lot of information. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of it I never bother to look at. But what I always look at, especially before the show, is I always look at the stuff that relates to the show. So the most important things that relate to the show is, of course, this part here, which just basically gives you the credits. It tells you the name of the show, who the stars are, who the director is, the ensemble. Immediately thereafter, it's so cool. You have literally a photo of every cast member. It's a black and white. It's really a headshot, too.
Show us the other page.
Yeah.
There you go.
And you get to see everybody. And then after you see these photos, there's the cast of characters, which is nice. And then this is really a fun thing. It gives you the scene breakdowns. So a scene breakdown is all the major scenes that occur in an act. So this would, I don't know, let me see. I'm going to hold this up. So basically, here I have Hello, Dolly, which is even better because it's a musical. So it'll go Act 1, and it will not only list the scenes, but it'll list the songs and then who is singing. If this was not a musical, it would just maybe say this play, Scene 1, Breakfast Nook, daytime, Scene 2, The Office, an hour later, and so on and so on. And it's interesting because I tend to not want to look at those things before I see the play, but after I see the play, it definitely gives me a sense as a playwright how they broke up the scenes. And this is a neat thing. It just fell out. this as little pieces of paper. Not always, but sadly, often when I do see a play, somebody in the company will not be there, and an understudy or some other member of the ensemble will take their place. So this is a production of Hello, Dolly I saw about 2 years ago at the Shubert Theater with Bernadette Peters and Victor Garber, and two people in a role were replaced by the understudy. So I know that night, which is great, because the other thing, and maybe the best part, is this section here called Who's Who in the Cast. And in the Who's Who is in the cast, there's little biographies of everybody, and not just the actors, not just the writer, not just the director, but even like the lighting designer and the producers. And I'm gonna put on my glasses, just there we go. And you can see things like this, what else have they worked on? And I enjoy that a lot, because especially when you're watching a play and you don't know who's in the cast in a smaller part, and you find out that, oh, I saw them in Lend Me a Tenor, and they also are on that TV show Wonder Pets. Or one of the funniest things growing up in New York, my sister and I would always check to see who had Law and Order credits, or Kate and Allie credits, or credits on The Equalizer, whatever show at that time that was doing what they call New York casting. And it would be really neat too, because there's a section called About the Theater. And I deliberately picked this one because the Shubert Theater is one of the most famous ones. The Shubert organization is the leading, they own most of the theaters on the Great White Way. So here it says that Sam S. Shubert Theater, named in honor of the founder of the Shubert Theatrical Empire, is one of the jewels of the Shubert organization. And it tells you the theater opened up October 2nd, 1913 with Hamlet. Then it tells you our most recent tenants, I love that word, have included Matilda, 1,554 performances, and Memphis, 1,016 performances. And it goes on to list things. And for example, they list Bernadette Peters in Gypsy, which is great, because this production I saw of Hello, Dolly with my mom, I saw it, had Bernadette Peters. So once again, I saw Bernadette Peters at the same place I had seen her before. It lists things like, I like to read the biography, if you don't mind, of Victor Garber. It's a great one, because I would imagine most people don't know who Victor Garber is unless you catch a lot of Broadway theater, or you're a big fan of small character actors on TV shows and movies, because that is probably the most likely way to find them. But here you read it, and it goes, he played for Horace Van Gelder in Hello, Dolly's, which, in this scene, I'd say it's the second most important part. And it goes, he originated the roles in the Broadway production of Sweeney Todd. I saw that. Noise is Off. I saw him in that. Lend Me a Tenor. I saw him in that. And then it goes on, and then it lists, films, Argo, Milk, Legally Blonde, television, Frasier, Will and Grace, The Orville, and then Alias, of course, and so on and so on. And sometimes, and I wanted to see if I could find one here, but like if you go to somebody who's new, like Molly Riggs, she was in this, and they only list her off-Broadway productions, and then they tell you, that she did a one-woman show, that she got her BFA at Carnegie Mellon University. Sometimes they'll tell you this is their Broadway debut, or they live with 2 cats, or they want to dedicate this performance to their mother. And then you get further along into these things, and you find out, the person who did the orchestrations is someone who also does orchestrations for Paul McCartney and Barbara Streisand. And, there are people who, there's stories about the original production, because you go to the original producer and they'll give you the entire history of David Merrick, or in this case, Jerry Herman, the guy who wrote the lyrics, and you get all the lyrics. So it's a lot of the history. Now, in truth, Randall, normally when I arrive to the theater, at best I have maybe a half hour. At worst, I have about 10 minutes in which to read all of this, and I don't always get through all of it in that time. Sometimes I'll read it during the intermission. Sometimes I'll just reread it later. Uh, I will always grab bunches of these at the end of the show. I will give them as gifts to friends of mine back in California or in New York if they're big fans of theater. So this, but I always keep a minimum of 2 copies for myself. And it's been a big fascination of mine since I was a teenager in the early 80s.
Right. So what age did you start?
I started going to theater when I was very young in the 70s, but my earliest, I saw Sweeney Todd in 1979, which Victor Garber was in, and my mom bought me a program guide, which is another thing I have not as many. Have you ever gotten a program guide? It's normally a big, go ahead.
Yeah, so sometimes you go to the theater and the playbill you just went through, they give you that for free. They want everybody to have a playbill.
Yeah.
And it has advertising in it sometimes. But you're talking about sometimes you go to a show and it's a big show and they have like music concerts have this too sometimes. They have like a nice big program that just has a lot of nice pictures in it.
Interviews, background information. It's a lot of fun. So I think actually the first thing I ever got was that for Sweeney Todd, which I could do a whole other show on. But I remember, I think in 1982, I was maybe 16 at the time. I saw Athol Fugard's Master Harold in The Boys, which starred James Earl Jones, Lonnie Chapman, and a newcomer, a guy named Danny Glover. And I kept the program guide for that. I kept the playbill, and it's great too because I don't think Danny Glover has done much stage work, certainly not much Broadway theater. And this was just 2 years before he would end up doing Lethal Weapon. So it's quite a coup to have this as one of my earliest ones. But at that point, I normally catch a play for my birthday every year. I mean, it's not the only time I'll catch a play, but it's certainly one of the most consistent times I'll catch a play. And that's probably when I started doing that.
So you always get a playbill and you don't always get the program guide?
I rarely get the program guide. Every so often I will because they're expensive, and I often feel that, I don't know, I would actually, because they're expensive, and normally when I've gone to the theater, I've spent so much money already that I get cheap, and I'd rather not do that. It's terrible to admit to.
So I know you like to have one pristine playbill. You told me this before. You like to have one pristine playbill and put it into like a comic book collector plastic sleeve.
A plastic bag, yeah. And then I put it in a big translucent box stacked with all these other playbills. I don't have a lot. I don't think I have more than 50 playbills because, in fairness, I doubt in all my theater going I've seen more than 50 plays on Broadway. Though I have to admit, that's still a lot of plays. That's still at least one play a year or 2 plays a year. I've never bothered to actually sit and index them. I'll say I have a couple of playbills that were gifted to me by other people of plays I haven't seen. But I would say about 75, 80% of the playbills I have are for plays I have seen.
And you usually read them at the play, but you told me you don't tend to go back too often and look at them.
I'll look at them over the course of a couple of years. I don't look at them. In fact, the most common time for me to look at them is when I'm putting in a new playbill, because then I can pick up the old playbill since I keep them in a box. And it's like this playbill here. It's dawned on me. This is from 2 years ago. This is from 2018. It seems so recently. But it's in great shape, but it's not. And in a way, a playbill is almost a souvenir because the minute I hold that playbill in my hand, the memory of the experience comes back to me. You know, the story of this particular thing of Hello, Dolly was, it was a rainy day in New York City. I was visiting my mom. There was no good movies playing. We were on the Upper West Side having cookies at a place like a little French cafe, And it was early enough in the day. It was maybe like 1:30. We just didn't know what to do. And I said, "Do you want to go see if there's anything playing at the theater?" So we walked across the street to Lincoln Center, which has a TKST. And we just said, "You got anything for a matinee?" And they're like, "Yeah, we do." I said, "Well, whatever you have, it's a really great ticket for Hello, Dolly." We did not know, to be honest with you, who was in the lead. For some weird reason, I didn't think Bernadette Peters was going to be in the lead. I don't know why, but I was surprised that she was still in the lead. And we got the tickets and we hopped in a cab, and like literally less than 15 minutes later, we were at the theater, and we had like second row center seats. They were gorgeous. And we were always been big fans of Bernadette Peters, and we'd always been big fans of Victor Garber. And I remember my mom, who's an artist, loves set design and she loves costume design. And in the second act, when there is a lot of great numbers inside a restaurant, like the big Hello, Dolly scene, for example, that anyone who's ever seen even the movie knows, my mom loved these turn-of-the-century costumes and sets, and I did too. So in a way, the thing about theater is it's ephemeral. You only have the live experience in the time that you have it. So the souvenir, which is the playbill, triggers all these wonderful memories, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Could you, you remember you're telling me about meeting Angela Lansbury one time?
Oh, yeah. And that's a great one because that's Sweeney Todd. So, that's the thing about theater is that as an audience member and as a performer, it's a moment in time that you're sharing. So, oh my God, 20 years ago, I was a women's shoe salesman here at Macy's Beverly Center. And that's a very expensive mall in a very expensive part of town.
I just want to say, I remember you telling me it was a very lucrative job for you.
Oh, it was very lucrative, very lucrative. And all sorts of people would come in. And I remember one day seeing this woman. She had her back to me, and she was wearing a beautiful white crepe suit. And this gentleman who was with her was wearing an ascot and a blazer, like he walked off the deck of a ship. They were like, I literally just said out loud, "You guys are the most elegant people I've ever seen at the Beverly Center." And the woman turns to me and says, "Oh, well, thank you so much. I just came from a funeral, so I guess you could say I'm dressed to kill." And then after she laughed and I laughed, she said, "Oh, that was terrible. I can't believe I said it." And I said, "You know what? I've heard you say worse. I saw you in Sweeney Todd." So for those of you who don't know Sweeney Todd, it takes place in London in the 19th century. The shortest version of the story is there's a barber and he cuts off the heads of his clients, which is kind of a weird business. But then the bodies get chopped up into meat pies, which are sold by his landlady, Mrs. Lovett. And she played Mrs. Lovett. It was at the Uris Theater. I saw it. It ran from 1979 to 1980. She won a Tony for her performance. And when she had heard that I had seen her in it, she told her husband, and we spent maybe 15, 20 minutes talking about what was it like to work with Stephen Sondheim, the set, which was 3 stories and was a cyclorama. What was it like? She said that every night someone would get beaten and bloody during the performance. She said it reminded her of living in London during the Blitz. And she just was fortunate that she never got hit. And, people would come up to her as I was trying to sell her shoes, saying, "Oh, Angela Lansbury, I love you on Murder, She Wrote." And she was very polite about it, but she couldn't have given a crap about Murder, She Wrote. And I will say that anytime, and I've met a few actors in my life who I've seen on stage do theater, and they'll always stop to talk about that.
Well, I just want to interject. Serious actors, most of them consider the stage as actual acting, and TV, camera acting is not really acting, right? I mean, that's a general sentiment that many actors have.
I mean, you could honestly say that in some senses, this playbill is a lot like a baseball card. And, in a sense that live theater is like sport. So like, "Oh, Angela, I have your rookie card from when you played with the Oakland A's." Like, oh, that brings back your certain times, because that's kind of what it is. I mean, it is a play. You are a player. You are playing the role, just like a player and an athlete is playing a game. And I think for all parties involved, it's I saw you live, you saw me live, and the playbill, yeah, like a sports card, it lists your what else you've done, your background, your training, previous experiences, what led you to this point. Does it really inform your experience of the play? For me, yes, because I'm a playwright, I have a background in theater. So yeah, I do think that for me, knowing what are the works I've seen, if not just the performer, but the people who made the stage, the clothing the director has done, helps me see if there are any overwhelming trends in that particular work. Is this the best musical adaptation I've seen by Bartlett Shear? Is this the worst musical adaptation I've seen by Bartlett Shear? Did I like this choreographer he used in Fiddler? Is this choreographer he's using in Hello, Dolly, who was also the choreographer for South Pacific? I'm making this up. That may or not be true. How well do they work in this production? And it's the same thing if you were watching a baseball game. You're thinking about, given their previous plays for what other teams, what other games, what are they bringing to tonight's event?
Well, stage acting is very much like, for an actor, it's very much like being an athlete, right? It takes skill and training and practice, and there's a lot of similarities. And
a director is a lot like a coach.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can totally see why you'd make the connection.
Producers are like managers. Yeah, so you've come to the event to watch the spectacle, to watch the event. And it's interesting because at the end of the show, normally it's littered with playbills. So it's pretty easy to grab a couple. And also there's always a fresh stack. So I try to grab from the fresh stack that's normally in the back of one of the rows, so I don't even have to take the used ones.
Yes,
it's pretty easy to do.
Yes, I've been to the theater here in LA, and I mean, most people will read the playbill before the show and then throw it away at the end.
And people do sell these. You can buy them online. They're a collector's item. Even the ones that aren't autographed, which is 90% of my own, are not autographed. People will buy them.
You have some autographed ones, right?
I have a few, but not a lot. It's not to wait outside to get the artist to get them to sign it. It's a big ordeal. I've had a couple of times I've done it, but it's almost, I rarely do. I remember once standing out in the cold for Stephen Fry to do that, and Mark Rylance. It was a production of Twelfth Night, and I'm really glad because they're amazing actors, and it was completely wonderful. But unless I'm going to the theater all by myself and the weather is just perfect, I won't do that. So it's not a necessity for my playbill collection.
So you got autographs from both those gentlemen?
Yes.
And so what was that like? You stood outside in the back of...
I stood outside. It was actually a cold winter's night. Mark Rylance had one of those foldable bikes. I had him sign it. Stephen Fry, I got a photo with him as well. If you don't know who Stephen Fry or Mark Rylance are, you're stupid, and you shouldn't be watching this show. Or, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. You really should be watching this show. Mark Rylance has been in a lot of movies, but really you should see him in theater. He's in something right now, and I'm blanking on it. But he was in Bridge of Spies as the Russian agent. And Stephen Fry, I like him from Jeeves and Wooster, but he's been in a number of things.
So you stood out in the back of the theater. Was there anybody else back there waiting for an autograph?
Oh, a ton of people. There's always a ton of people. It's very rare. Only one or two times have I been able to wait back outside, and it was so stone cold that I actually was able to get one or two famous people. I can't remember now the names, which is terrible.
They both came out, signed everybody's programs, and then got on their bicycles.
Or they get into a limousine. It just depends. I once saw Glenn Close. I didn't even bother. She had on a mink coat. She signed like 3 autographs, got into her limousine, and took off.
All right. Well,
but the playbill, that is really the one thing that you're gifted with. And I'm really there. If my house went on fire, that would certainly be one of the things I would try to gather under my arms and run out of the house with. Hey, are you like me? Do you collect playbills? Do you think I'm weird? Do you think I'm wonderful? What's your favorite playbill? This is a great time to share with us. Do you think me a weirdo for this now, Randall?
No. I mean, I have a few playbills from plays. I mean, I just threw them in my giant general file. I mean, I started throwing them away. Though.
You have the playbills for everything you did with IO.
Well, I used to work on the show called Big News, and then it turned into Top Story. And yeah, I have all the very cheap playbills we made for that show. I made some of the original ones. Yeah, I kept all of those. I mean, I worked on the show, so I don't know. I just kept them all.
Weird. I have a lot of things where plays I've done and shows I've been as a performer. I've kept almost none of them. So,
I've tried anything I was a performer in or worked on. Yeah, I tried to keep them.
That is interesting. So for you, the stuff that you've worked on is what you keep. For me, the stuff that I went to is what I keep. Well, what a dichotomy between the two of us. This ran a little longer than I had hoped, so I want to thank everyone for bearing with us. We'll probably return to the regular format after this episode, but hey, we probably will try this again another time. Until then, I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Thanks for listening or watching. Bye.
Bye.